This is Deuteronomy 25. Moses is still giving final instructions to Israel before he passes away. Now on to a section on flogging, verse 1. If there is a controversy between men and they come to judgment, and the judges judge them, then they shall justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. It shall be, if the wicked man is worthy to be beaten, then the judge shall cause him to lie down and to be beaten before his face according to his wickedness by number. He may sentence him to no more than 40 stripes. He shall not give more, lest if he should give more and beat him more than that many stripes, then your brother will be degraded in your sight. Comment: there is no such thing as incarceration or jail time in the law of Moses. If there was any confinement at all, it was in a city of refuge for the punishment of unintentional murder, Numbers 35:25. So what other punishments did the law prescribe? For theft, it was twofold to fivefold restitution, Exodus 22:1-4. Sometimes it was the death penalty. We reviewed that in the last chapter. It was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth in cases of personal injury, Exodus 21:24. Now in verse 2, we see the first mention of court-imposed beating, also translated as flogging, whipping, lashing, scourging, and smiting. Verse 2, the guilty party shall be beaten before his face. Speaking of the judge's face, the judge will look on and supervise the beating. Verse 3, the beating will be no more than 40 stripes. By the way, Paul said he received 39 lashes from the Jews on 5 different occasions for preaching the gospel, 2 Corinthians 11:24. Verse 4, you shall not muzzle the ox when he treads out the grain. Comment: here the farmer is using ox power to separate the grain from the stalk, to thresh it, in other words. The ox is either stepping on the stalks or she's pulling a sledge over the stalks to knock the grains out. By law, the farmer shouldn't muzzle his ox while she's doing that. In other words, he should let her eat some of the grain. We've been pointing out that many of Moses' laws go beyond what's actually written. This is a case in point. 1 Corinthians 9:9, Paul said that this law is really about people. Though the letter of the law applies only to oxen, the spirit of the law is that the laborer is worthy of his wages. Don't withhold wages. Coming now, there's a 6-verse section on the duty of a husband's brother. Verse 5, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead shall not be married outside to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. It shall be that the firstborn whom she bears shall succeed in the name of his brother who is dead, that his name not be blotted out of Israel. If the man doesn't want to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go up to the gates to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up to his brother a name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of a husband's brother to me. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him, and if he stands and says, I don't want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, and loose his shoe from off his foot and spit in his face. She shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. His name shall be called in Israel the house of him who had his shoe removed. Comment: going back to the laws of inheritance in Numbers chapter 37, if a man dies, his inheritance goes to his sons. If there are no sons, then the people in line for the inheritance are their daughters, brothers, father's brothers, and then finally the nearest relative. But in the passage we just read, if the dead man can acquire a son by the union of his widow and his brother, the line of inheritance will stop right there. The first son of that union will get the inheritance. The brother must marry the widow and, if possible, give her a son. This tradition goes back at least as far as the days of Judah and Tamar, Genesis 38. The intent is to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. The widow gets automatic security for life. The dead man's property will stay as close in the family as possible, and the dead man's family will be perpetuated. But if the brother refuses to uphold his duty to marry the widow, verse 9, the widow shall shame him by publicly removing his sandal in front of the elders and spitting in his face. Afterwards, verse 10, the law calls for Israel to shame him on an ongoing basis. They shall not use his name anymore. They shall call him he who had his sandal removed. Now switching subjects, verse 11. When men strive against each other, and the wife of one draws near to deliver her husband out of the hand of him who strikes him, and puts out her hand and takes him by his private parts, then you shall cut off her hand. Your eye shall have no pity. Comment: if a man causes another man to lose his genitals, he shall lose his own genitals under the eye for eye law, Exodus 21:24. But what if the offender is a woman? She loses her hand. The weights and measures coming up are for commerce, for weighing out silver, for example. There shall be no faulty scales, verse 13. You shall not have in your bag diverse weights, one heavy and one light. You shall not have in your house diverse measures, one large and one small. You shall have a perfect and just weight. You shall have a perfect and just measure, that your days may be long in the land which Yahweh your God gives you. For all who do such things, all who do unrighteously, are an abomination to Yahweh your God. Comment: this law isn't just about measuring commodities. It's mostly about our standard of measuring other people. Jesus said, quote, in the way you judge, you will be judged, and by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. Matthew 7:2. In other words, God will judge us using the same standard we use for judging other people. Therefore, it's a no-brainer. We need to give people as much leniency as we can. The more lenient we are on others, the more lenient God will be with us. So let the leniency begin. It's time for an all-out campaign against personal animosity. But there's a pervasive misunderstanding we should clear up here. Every crime has a particular victim, but every crime also takes a toll on society as a whole. For example, if someone burglarizes my neighbor, now I don't feel as safe in my home, and I might have to go to the expense and trouble of buying fences, locks, burglar alarms, hiring house sitters, keeping dogs. My property value goes down if the neighborhood is crime-ridden. Maybe I can't let my children play outside. I might even have to move to a new location where crime rates are lower. The ripple effect of his crime goes on and on. I can forgive the burglar for the effect he had on me when he burglarized my neighbor's house, but mostly it's not about me. It's about my neighbor and society as a whole. Therefore, it's not my place or right, or even it's not even possible for me to forgive him for what he did to somebody else. I can release him from any animosity I might have for him, but I can't release him from the rest. It's the same for a judge before whom the burglar will hopefully appear. It's fine for the judge to have personal feelings of pity for the burglar, but that shouldn't stop him from delivering justice on behalf of the victim and society. The judge does not have the right to let him off because it's not about the judge. It's about the victim and society and the justice due to them, and the judge has no right to pervert that justice. Speaking of not letting somebody off, Moses is about to render some judgment against the Amalekites. The backstory is that Amalek attacked Israel almost as soon as they left Egypt. Joshua organized a counterattack and defeated them while Moses looked on with his rod uplifted and Aaron and Hur holding up his arms. Afterward, Yahweh said to Moses, quote, write this for a memorial in a book and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under the sky. Exodus 17:14. So now Moses, remembering what Yahweh said, tells Israel this, verse 17. Remember what Amalek did to you by the way as you came out of Egypt, how he met you by the way and struck the rearmost of you, all who were feeble behind you, and you were faint and weary, and he didn't fear God. Therefore it shall be when Yahweh your God has given you rest from your enemies all around, in the land which Yahweh gives you for an inheritance to possess it, that you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under the sky. You shall not forget. Comment: back in Exodus 17, Yahweh said he would make war with Amalek from generation to generation. It's going to be a few centuries before we hear the last of them, but eventually the tribe of Simeon and King David will finish off the Amalekites in 1 Chronicles. In setting himself against Amalek, Yahweh is upholding the promise he made to Abraham, quote, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who treats you with contempt. Genesis 12:3. That's the chapter. Deuteronomy 26 is next at landofhavilah.net. Deuteronomy 26.